Hi everyone, Lisa Haven here, and I've got huge news to share with you. Well, the Treasury Department is about to, quote, run out of cash. At least that is according to the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office. No joke. They are stating that if the debt ceiling isn't raised or brought up, then their funds will be exhausted and they will more than likely run out of cash come mid-October, maybe even September. No joke. But don't take my word for it. Let's go straight to the CBO website so you can see it for yourself. On the screen here, you'll see the federal debt and the statutory limit of June 2017. Now I'm going to read the main section here, and I encourage everyone to read it. It's only 4 pages long, but it says, and I quote, "The debt limit, which is commonly referred to as the debt ceiling, is the maximum amount of debt that the Department of Treasury can issue to both the public and other federal agencies." Okay, this is what it's referencing here, is the debt limit. What are those public and federal agencies, for starters? Well, if you turn over to page 2, there's a section that says what public is and what the government is. So it states, debt held by the public consists mainly of securities that the Treasury issues to raise cash, which funds federal operations that revenues are insufficient to cover. Such debt is held by outside investors, including the Federal Reserve System, which the feds, it's not a government entity, ergo the reason it fell under the public side. Now then it goes to talk, well, what is government debt? Well, debt held by the government accounts is debt issued to federal government trust funds, and we'll get into some of those trust funds, and other federal accounts for internal government transactions. It is not traded in capital markets. Trust funds, here's what they are: for Social Security, for Medicare, military requirement, and civil service retirement and disability are what hold most of that debt. So let's go back to the front of that page here. It says the debt limit, again, also known as the debt ceiling, is the maximum amount of debt the Department of Treasury can issue to both the public, the Fed was in that, and the federal agencies, which we had Social Security, disability, and things like that involved in there. All right, moving on. That amount is set by law and has been increased over the years to finance government operations. The debt limit was suspended in November 2nd, 2015. It was suspended at 18.113 trillion. We found that in what is the current situation section. However, there's a problem, because on March 15th, 2017, the suspension expired and the Secretary of Treasury announced a debt insurance suspension period. During that period, existing statute allowed the Treasury to take a number of extraordinary measures, which I'll tell you what those are, to borrow additional funds without breaching the debt ceiling. What happened as a result? I'm going to take you over to what is the current situation section. It says the debt limit was reset to 19.809 trillion because they went a little over. So they basically reset it to that number as a result of that. But they've been allowed, quote, extraordinary measures. What are these extraordinary measures that the government's taking to basically loopholes for the debt ceiling? Well, that's also on the second page here, where it says what extraordinary measures are still available to the Treasury. And it says, the measures taken by the Treasury after March 15th, 2017 have consisted of suspending the insurance of new state and local government securities, saving bonds, suspending investments of Thrift Saving Plan G Fund, and limiting investments of the Civil Service Retirement and Disability Fund and the Postal Service Retiree Health Benefit Fund. Those are the ones that have been taken. Now, the next list that you see there, where it says the following measures are still available, are things that the Treasury is still able to do if they need more, quote, extraordinary measures to go above and beyond that debt ceiling there. So, moving on to probably the most important words in this entire document. Back to that second paragraph there, it says, the Congressional Budget Office projects that if the debt limit remains unchanged, those measures will be exhausted and the Treasury will most likely run out of cash early to mid-October. When their extraordinary measures that I just showed you run out, then the public funds and the government funds are in a lot of trouble because they're not going to be able to hand out any more cash. It goes on to says, however, the timing and the magnitude of revenues and outlays over the next few months could vary noticeably from the CBO's projections. So those measures could be exhausted and the Treasury could run out of cash earlier or later than they project. The government would then be unable to pay its obligations fully, so it would have to delay making payments for its programs and activities, default on its debt obligations, or both. Not my words. Those are the words of the Congressional Budget Office itself. But that leaves me one question. Well, what happens? Because we all know the economy is on an unstable path. So what happens if that happens? What happens if they run out of cash? Well, believe it or not, they answer that question in this document. Take a look at page 4, the section that says when the extraordinary measures and cash run out, what's going to happen then? Well, it says the debt limit is not increased if it's not increased above the amount that was established in March 16, 2017. The treasurer is not going to be allowed and authorized to issue any more debt that increases the amount outstanding. It will be able to issue additional debt only in the amount of maturing debt or accounts cleared by taking extraordinary measures. That restriction would ultimately lead to, and I quote, delays in payments for government programs and activities. Talk about riots. Talk about crazy things going on. A default on the government's debt obligations, or both. They estimate that without an increase in the debt limit, the Treasury, by using all available extraordinary measures, would most likely be able to continue borrowing and have sufficient cash to make its usual payments until early to mid-October of this year. Boom. That's like a bombshell hidden in a 4-page report that you're not going to hear on the mainstream flippin' media. Why? Because they're too consumed with telling you lies. They're too consumed with making fake videos with Muslims like CNN and planting them to paint it in a certain picture, or they're too busy doing fake news and focusing on the Russia narrative, which is just a fake, bogus Russia narrative, which CNN producer has admitted to. Oh yeah, Project Veritas, go there if you've not seen it. And too busy doing all of that to tell you the truth of what's really going on in the economy. Sometimes there are things that I prefer not to report or talk about, but we cannot ignore things when they do happen or they are right in front of our face. I'm going to leave a link to everything below. Please make sure you check that out. Look, and if you're not prepared with food storage, you need to do that. If you don't have medical supplies, flashlights, things like that, then you need to get that now. Now, you guys know that this one helps fund what I do here. This is ruggedreserves.com. This is the freaking most awesome flashlight ever. It's military grade, hardcore stuff. It's got a compass, it's got solar powered light as all get out, a wire cutter, a window breaker, a seatbelt thing here that cuts the seatbelt. It's freaking awesome. Most amazing flashlight you'll ever find, but there's also a mini version of it, if you will, that can fit in your purse. But go to Rugged Reserves, use the code HAVEN to get 15% off anything on the site, and it's all kinds of preparedness and survival gear. Just make sure you use HAVEN to get that discount. Anyhow, one last thing that I want to say is the Bible did tell us that things like this would happen in the latter days. And that's exactly what we're seeing. Economic instability, wars and rumors of wars, talk of turmoil and chaos, nationality against nationality, race, ethnic group against ethnic group. These are all things that we're seeing under the radar and coming now to the surface. And economic turmoil, I believe, is also one of those. So keep an eye out. Make sure you get right with Jesus. Anyhow, thanks again for tuning into my channel. I'm Lisa Haven, signing out.